The evening was quiet inside the restaurant. Glass walls showed the city lights outside, cars passing, and people walking home. Inside, soft music played, and the air smelled of fresh bread and roasted meat. Waiters moved politely from table to table, serving well-dressed guests who laughed and spoke loudly as if they had no worries in life. At a corner table sat a man in a dark suit. He wasn't speaking to anyone. His plate was half finished, and he slowly cut the last piece of steak. He looked calm, almost cold, like a man who carried too many thoughts inside his head. His eyes hardly moved, except when the waiter came to refill his glass. Just then, near the door, a thin figure appeared. A girl, no more than 12 or 13, stood hesitantly. Her clothes were worn and too big for her frame, the sleeves torn, her shoes nearly falling apart. She looked nervous, like someone who didn't belong in a place like this. The guards at the entrance noticed her, but she slipped past, moving quietly between the tables. Her eyes fixed on the plates. People were leaving behind. She reached the man's table and stopped. For a moment, she only stared at the food in front of him. Her lips trembled, her stomach growled, but she pressed her hand against it to silence the sound. Finally, in a voice so soft that only he could hear, she whispered, "Sir, may I have your leftovers?" The words seemed to freeze the air. At the tables nearby, a few people glanced over. A waiter frowned, ready to step in and push her away. Guests whispered, annoyed at the sight of a poor child disturbing their evening. But the man in the suit did not move. He lifted his eyes slowly from the plate and looked at her. The girl's heart raced. She thought he would shout, or worse, call the manager. She almost turned to run, but her legs felt too weak. The silence was unbearable. Every second felt heavy. The man set down his fork. His gaze was steady, almost unreadable. He leaned back in his chair, studying her face. Her cheeks were pale, her hair messy, and her eyes tired but still shining with a desperate kind of hope. "Leftovers?" he said quietly, his voice calm. The girl nodded quickly, her eyes lowering. She felt shame burn her skin. She wished she didn't have to ask, but hunger had left her with no choice. The waiter stepped forward, ready to drag her out, but the man raised his hand slightly. The waiter stopped. The entire restaurant seemed to hold its breath, waiting for what he would do. The girl bit her lip. She had asked strangers for scraps before, on the street, near markets, near bus stands. Most had ignored her. Some had thrown angry words. A few had given her half a piece of bread. She had never walked into such a rich place before. She didn't even know why she had dared tonight. Maybe it was the smell of the food. Maybe it was the warm light that promised safety for a moment. The man's eyes softened just slightly, though his face still looked serious. "Sit," he said. The girl froze, unsure if she had heard right. She looked round. People were staring. Some guests laughed in disbelief. One woman shook her head, whispering to her husband. "Sit," the man repeated, his voice firm but not unkind. The girl's legs shook as she pulled out the chair across from him. She sat on the edge, as if ready to run at any moment. Her hands clutched the side of the chair, and she kept her head low. The man lifted his hand and signaled to the waiter. "Bring her a fresh plate." "The same as mine," he said. The waiter blinked in confusion. "Sir, do as I said," the man interrupted. His tone carried the kind of authority that left no room for argument. The waiter bowed his head and hurried off. The restaurant murmured louder now. Some thought it was strange. Others were touched but still surprised. The girl could hardly believe what she had just heard. A whole plate, for her. Her lips parted, but no words came out. She had only asked for scraps. She couldn't imagine tasting food that had been made for someone like him. The man leaned forward slightly. "Tell me," he said, his voice low, "why are you here?" The girl swallowed hard. Her throat was dry. She wanted to explain, but her story was heavy. She feared that if she spoke too much, he would regret his kindness. Still, his eyes sharp yet calm held her in place. She whispered, "I was hungry. I haven't eaten since yesterday." The man nodded slowly, as if he already knew. His fingers tapped the table lightly, and for a moment, his face seemed distant. Lost in some old memory. The waiter returned with a steaming plate of food, setting it carefully in front of the girl. She stared at it, her hands trembling. The smell of warm bread, butter, and meat reached her nose, and her stomach cried louder. But she didn't touch it yet. She looked up at the man, unsure if it was truly for her. "Eat," he said simply. Her eyes filled with tears as she lifted the fork. The first bite felt unreal, like a dream. She chewed slowly, afraid it would vanish if she hurried. Around her, whispers continued, but in that moment, all she heard was the sound of her own heartbeat and the kindness in the stranger's voice. The girl ate slowly, each bite tasting like a miracle. She held the fork with both hands, afraid she might drop it. For the first time in many days, her stomach began to feel warm. Yet, she still sat stiffly, like someone expecting the dream to end at any moment. Across from her, the man in the dark suit said nothing. He watched quietly, not in pity, but with a strange kind of patience. The noise of the restaurant continued around them, but at their table, time seemed to slow. After a while, he spoke. "What is your name?" The girl froze, her fork halfway to her mouth. No one had asked her name in a long time. People on the street usually called her hey or you. She lowered her eyes, unsure if she should answer. I don't remember the last time someone asked me that," she whispered. Then softly, she said her name. The man nodded. "A strong name," he replied. She glanced up, surprised. Strong, she had never thought of herself that way. To her, strength was people walking past her without fear, people with families, people who didn't worry about food. The man lifted his glass but didn't drink. "Do you have anyone? Parents, family?" The girl's lips trembled. She placed her fork down. They're gone. "My father left long ago. My mother." Her voice cracked. She pressed her hands together tightly. "She got sick. I tried to help her, but..." Her words faded into silence. The man's face remained calm, but inside, his chest tightened. He remembered cold nights when he too had gone to bed hungry as a child. He remembered standing outside bakeries, smelling food he couldn't buy. The memory of his mother's tired eyes still haunted him, though no one in the world knew that story. The girl tried to continue eating, but tears blurred her vision. She wiped them quickly, embarrassed. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I didn't mean to disturb your dinner. I only wanted the food you didn't need." He leaned back in his chair. His voice was steady, but softer now. "You disturbed nothing. People disturb themselves when they look away from someone hungry. You only asked." The girl stared at him, confused. Nobody had ever spoken like that to her. The waiter came by again, nervous. "Sir, is everything fine?" "Yes," the man answered sharply. "Better than fine." The waiter nodded and left, though his eyes lingered with curiosity. Around the restaurant, the whispers grew. Some shook their heads, calling it foolishness. Others looked thoughtful but said nothing. The girl ate quietly again, until her plate was half empty. Then she paused and pushed it slightly away. "I don't want to waste," she said softly. "But I feel full." The man raised a brow. "Full?" She nodded shyly. "I've never felt this full before." For the first time, the corner of his mouth lifted. It wasn't a smile, not fully, but a small crack in his stone-like face. He placed his knife and fork neatly on his plate and folded his hands. "You asked for leftovers," he said slowly. "But I gave you more. Do you know why?" The girl shook her head, wide-eyed. "Because leftovers are for yesterday. You belong to tomorrow." She blinked, not understanding at first. His words felt heavy, like they carried a secret meaning. She wanted to ask what he meant, but her voice caught in her throat. The man looked at her, his eyes sharp yet strangely kind. "You were ready to eat what others throw away. That tells me you've survived worse than most people in this room. And if you can survive that, you can do more, much more." The girl's heart beat faster. She didn't know why, but his words lit something inside her, something she thought had died long ago. He placed a card on the table, sliding it toward her. She hesitated, staring at the small piece of paper with golden letters printed neatly across it. She didn't know what it meant, but it looked important, far more important than anything she had ever held. What is this?" she whispered. The man didn't answer directly. Instead, he said, "Come tomorrow. Show this card. Someone will take care of you. You won't go hungry again." Her breath caught. She stared at him, not sure if she could believe such a promise. Could a single night really change her life? She clutched the card with trembling fingers. Why? Why are you helping me? She asked, her voice breaking. The man looked past her, his gaze distant, as if staring into a memory only he could see. His jaw tightened. Because once, he said quietly, someone gave me more than leftovers. The girl held the card to her chest, her eyes wide with wonder. The room around them blurred the stares, the whispers, the clinking glasses. In that moment, it was only the hungry girl and the millionaire whose reply had given her not just food, but hope she never thought she'd feel again. The next morning, the girl woke up on a wooden bench near the bus stand. The cold air bit at her skin, and the noise of horns and shouting filled her ears. She had slept with the card clutched tightly in her hand, afraid it might be stolen. Each time she woke during the night, she checked to make sure it was still there. The golden letters on the card glowed faintly under the rising sun. She couldn't read all of it, but she knew it carried power. People like her didn't hold cards like this. People like her begged for coins and picked up crumbs. Yet here she was, staring at something that felt like a key to another world. Her stomach grumbled. But this time it wasn't as sharp. Last night's meal still gave her strength. She stood slowly, brushed off the dust from her clothes, and walked toward the address printed on the card. The city looked different today. She noticed shops opening, children in uniforms rushing to school, vendors arranging fruits and bread on carts. Every smell of food made her pause, but she held her steps steady. She had something more important waiting. Finally, she reached a tall building made of glass and steel. It towered over the street, shining in the morning light. She hesitated at the entrance. Guards in black uniforms stood firmly, their eyes sharp. She wondered if they would laugh at her torn dress and bare feet. One of them stepped forward. "You can't come in here," he said firmly. The girl's heart sank, but she quickly pulled out the card and held it up with trembling hands. "I was told to show this." The guard's eyes narrowed, then softened when he saw the golden letters. He exchanged a look with the other guard and nodded. "Wait here," he said. Moments later, he returned with a woman in a neat dress, carrying a small tablet. The woman bent down slightly to the girl's level. "You must be the one he sent," she said kindly. "Come with me." The girl followed, still nervous, but the warmth in the woman's voice gave her courage. She was led through wide halls with marble floors that gleamed like water. Workers in suits walked quickly, some talking on phones, others holding files. They all glanced at her, surprised, but no one said anything. Finally, the woman stopped at a door and opened it. Inside was a small room, simple yet bright, with a table, 2 chairs, and a glass of water waiting. "Sit," she said gently. The girl sat carefully, her hands gripping her knees. The woman tapped on her tablet, then looked up. "Do you know who gave you that card?" The girl nodded. "The man from the restaurant." The woman smiled faintly. "He doesn't give cards easily. If he gave one to you, it means he saw something special." The girl blinked in confusion. Special? She had never been called that before. She was used to words like dirty, beggar, or trouble. A few minutes later, the door opened again. The same man in the dark suit walked in, his presence filling the small room. He didn't look surprised to see her, almost as if he had known she would come. "You came," he said quietly. She nodded quickly. I didn't know if this was real, but I came." He sat across from her, resting his hands on the table. "Good. That means you have courage. Most people let fear stop them before they even start." The girl lowered her eyes, unsure how to respond. He slid another paper across the table. It wasn't golden like the card, but it had many lines of writing. "This," he said, "is your chance. A place to stay, food, clothes, but more important, school. You'll study, learn, and build a future." Her eyes widened. School. She had walked past schools many times, watching other children laugh as they carried their bags. She had dreamed of sitting at a desk, of holding a pencil, of writing her name neatly instead of scratching it on scraps. "School?" she whispered, as if the word itself might vanish. "Yes," he said firmly, "but it will not be easy. You must promise to work hard, to never waste what you're given. Do you understand?" The girl nodded quickly, tears filling her eyes. "I promise," she said, her voice shaking. For a moment, silence filled the room. Then, almost gently, the man leaned forward. "Do you know why I'm doing this?" She shook her head. His gaze turned distant again. "Because once, I was the one asking for leftovers, and someone gave me more than food. They gave me a chance. Without that, I would not be sitting here today. And now it is my turn to pass it on." The girl's chest tightened. She wanted to speak, to say thank you, but the words felt too small for what she felt. The man stood. "From this day on," he said, "you are not a beggar. You are a student. You are someone with a future." The woman in the neat dress smiled warmly, guiding the girl out of the room. As the door closed behind her, the girl pressed the golden card to her chest one last time. She didn't know what tomorrow would look like, but for the first time, she believed it could be brighter than yesterday. The car door shut softly behind her. For the first time in her life, the girl sat in the back seat of a shining black vehicle. The seats smelled of leather, and the engine purred instead of rattling. She clutched the small bag the woman had given her, new clothes folded neatly inside, and stared out the window as the city rolled past. The car drove into a quieter neighborhood. Trees lined the streets, children rode bicycles, and houses stood neatly side by side. It didn't feel like the city she knew. It felt like another world. Finally, the car stopped in front of a large building with a wide gate. Above it, carved in bold letters, were the words, "The Hope Home." Her chest tightened. Was this really for her? Inside the gates, she saw children laughing, some playing football, others sitting in groups reading. The sound of their joy felt strange to her ears, almost unbelievable. She stepped out slowly, her torn shoes crunching on the gravel. A kind-faced woman approached, wearing a light blue dress with a badge pinned to it. "Welcome," she said warmly. "We've been expecting you." The girl lowered her head, clutching her bag. She whispered, I don't belong here." The woman knelt down to her height and touched her shoulder. "Everyone who walks through that gate belongs. You are not alone anymore." Her throat tightened. She had been alone for so long that the words almost hurt to hear. She was led inside. The halls were painted with bright colors: yellow, green, blue. Children's drawings hung on the walls, some of houses, some of flowers, some of dreams scribbled in crayons. The smell of fresh food drifted from the kitchen, and her stomach, though still satisfied from last night, grumbled in memory. She was shown her room to beds neatly made, one already filled with a small pile of books and a teddy bear. "You'll share with another girl," the woman explained. "She's at school now, but you'll meet her soon." The girl sat on the bed assigned to her. A pillow, a blanket, a place to call hers. She ran her hand over the soft fabric, almost in disbelief. For years, benches, pavements, and empty corners had been her only home. Later that evening, she was given clean clothes and a warm bath. She stared at her reflection in the mirror, hardly recognizing the face that looked back. Her hair, washed and brushed, framed her cheeks differently. The dirt was gone, revealing skin she had forgotten could shine. She touched her cheek, whispering, "Is that really me?" When dinner was served, she joined the other children in a wide hall. The tables were long, filled with steaming bowls of rice, vegetables, and bread. She sat quietly at first, afraid to take too much, but the children laughed and nudged her gently, telling her to eat, to enjoy. Slowly, she lifted the spoon. Each bite still felt like a miracle. That night, she lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. The room was warm, the sheets soft, but her heart was restless. She thought of the man in the dark suit. Why had he chosen her? Out of all the children in the city, why her? His words echoed in her mind. "Leftovers are for yesterday. You belong to tomorrow." She didn't fully understand them yet, but they wrapped around her like a promise. The next morning, she was taken to school. The building was huge, with wide staircases and tall windows. Children in neat uniforms filled the halls, their shoes clicking on the floor. She felt small, her stomach knotting with fear. She didn't even know how to write her full name properly. Would they laugh at her? Would they know she didn't belong? Her new teacher, a gentle woman with glasses, smiled warmly. "We'll start from the beginning," she said kindly. "Don't worry. You're not late. You're right on time." The girl sat at a desk, a pencil placed in front of her. She picked it up slowly, her fingers trembling. The paper in front of her was blank. She bit her lip, afraid of making a mistake, but the teacher leaned close. "The first step is always small," she whispered. With shaky hands, the girl wrote a letter, just one letter of the alphabet. It was crooked, uneven, but it was hers. She stared at it for a long moment, then smiled shyly. It felt like planting a seed. Days turned into weeks. She studied, stumbled, and sometimes cried in frustration. But each day, she grew stronger. She learned to read small words, then bigger ones. She learned numbers, how to add and subtract. She even learned to laugh with the other children, to run without fear, to sleep without hunger. And though he never appeared at the school or the home, she sometimes caught glimpses of a black car parked quietly across the street. She knew he was watching, making sure she was safe. He never stayed long, but somehow, knowing he was there gave her courage. One evening, sitting by the window with her books, she whispered softly to herself, "Maybe I really do belong to tomorrow." Years passed faster than she ever imagined. What began as one golden card and one warm meal grew into an entire life she had never dared to dream of. The girl, once barefoot and hungry, now walked in polished shoes across the courtyard of her school. Books pressed against her chest, her uniform neat, her hair tied back. She was taller now, her eyes brighter, her face carrying a quiet strength. People no longer saw her as a shadow in the streets. They saw her as a student, a learner, someone with purpose. But deep inside, she had never forgotten the night everything changed. The whisper in the restaurant, the man's steady gaze, and the words that had become the anchor of her life. "Leftovers are for yesterday. You belong to tomorrow." Every exam she passed, every sentence she wrote, every friend she made, she carried those words like a flame inside her. One afternoon, after finishing her classes, she returned to the Hope home to find the director waiting at the gate. The woman smiled softly. "You've done well. Someone wishes to see you." Her heart skipped. She already knew who it was. She was led into a quiet garden behind the home. Flowers bloomed in careful rows, the air filled with the scent of jasmine. On a wooden bench sat the man in the dark suit, older now, his hair touched with gray, but still carrying the same presence that had silenced an entire restaurant years ago. She froze for a moment, the weight of time heavy on her chest. Then, slowly, she walked forward. The man looked up, his eyes studying her as he had that first night. "You've grown," he said calmly. She nodded, her voice trembling. I never thought I'd see you again. I never left," he replied. "I've been watching, quietly. You didn't need me to walk beside you. You only needed someone to open the door." Tears burned her eyes as she lowered herself onto the bench beside him. "You gave me more than food," she whispered. "You gave me a life. Everything I am now is because you didn't look away." For a moment, silence hung between them. Birds chirped softly in the garden. The man's gaze softened, though his face remained composed. "When you asked me for leftovers," he said slowly, "I saw myself, hungry, small, afraid. I remembered the day someone chose to give me a chance. That is the only reason I survived. And I swore, one day, I would do the same for someone else." She turned to him, tears sliding freely down her cheeks. "But why me? Out of all the people you could have helped, why me?" His eyes held hers. "Because you had the courage to ask. Most never do." Her chest tightened. She thought back to that night, how her whisper had felt like the smallest, weakest thing in the world. She hadn't known it was the very thing that would change everything. The man reached into his coat pocket and handed her a small envelope. "Your journey isn't over. Inside, you'll find what comes next. A scholarship, a chance to go further, to build something for yourself and maybe, one day, for others like you." Her fingers shook as she opened it, her eyes widening at the papers inside. She couldn't stop the sob that escaped her lips. "I don't know how to thank you," she whispered. The man stood slowly, adjusting his coat. "Don't thank me. Just remember this: when someone asks you for leftovers, don't give them scraps. Give them tomorrow." She rose to her feet, her tears falling like rain, but her heart stronger than it had ever been. "I will," she said firmly. "I promise." He nodded once, then turned and walked toward the gate. His steps were slow, steady, and full of quiet dignity. She watched him leave, her hand clutching the envelope, her chest filled with both gratitude and determination. That night, lying in her bed at the Hope home, she whispered to herself, "One whisper can change a life. Mine did, and now, one day, it will be my turn to answer someone else's." Her eyes closed, and for the first time, her dreams weren't of hunger or fear. They were of building, of giving, of tomorrow. And somewhere in the distance, the man in the dark suit drove away, knowing his own promise had been fulfilled. He had once been saved. Now he had saved another.